I still remember the first time I saw him. It was the beginning of the school year, and everything felt new and strange. New teachers, new faces, new energy. I was standing near the old oak tree beside the basketball court, trying to look like I wasn't nervous, when he walked by. He wasn't the type of guy who stood out right away. Not the loud, popular one everyone followed around. But something about the way he smiled, quiet, a little unsure, caught my attention. He had kind eyes, the kind that made you feel seen even when you weren't saying a word. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just curiosity. But later that day, I found him sitting in the library, pretending to read, but looking completely lost in thought. I almost walked past, but then he looked up, and our eyes met for the first time. Just a few seconds, but something about that moment stuck with me. For the next few days, we kept crossing paths, in the hallway, at the cafeteria, after class. Sometimes we'd nod or smile, sometimes we'd pretend not to notice. But deep inside, I could feel something quietly pulling me closer to him. It was on a rainy afternoon when we finally talked for the first time. Everyone else had rushed to the canteen, but I stayed in class, sketching by the window. The sound of rain has always been my favorite. It makes everything feel softer, like the world is breathing slower. He came over and asked, "You draw?" I looked up, a little surprised. "Yeah, sometimes." He smiled and asked if he could see my sketchbook. I hesitated, but something about his tone felt gentle, safe. So I handed it over. He flipped through it slowly, stopping at one of my drawings, a boy sitting under an umbrella, looking at a girl who didn't notice him. "That's really good," he said, and when I looked at him, he wasn't just being polite. He really meant it. Something about that moment, the sound of the rain, his voice, the warmth in his eyes. It stayed with me long after he walked away. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the way he smiled, the way he looked at my drawings like they mattered. I didn't know it yet, but that small conversation was the beginning of something I'd never forget. It wasn't fireworks or love at first sight. It was quieter than that, gentle, almost shy. But deep down, something inside me knew. My life had just changed in a small but important way. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first time I started to fall in love. After that rainy afternoon, things slowly started to change between us. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just little things that quietly became everything. It started with him smiling when he saw me in the hallway. Then he started sitting closer during class, pretending it was coincidence. Sometimes he'd borrow my pen even though I knew he had one. Sometimes he'd whisper small jokes when the teacher wasn't looking, just to see me laugh. We didn't talk about anything special at first. Just simple things, homework, songs, movies, food. But somehow every conversation felt special anyway. His presence had this strange comfort, like I didn't have to try so hard to be someone I wasn't. One afternoon we walked home together. It wasn't planned. We just happened to be heading the same way. The sky was painted with orange and pink, and the air smelled like rain again. We talked about dreams. Mine to travel someday, his to do something that mattered, though he didn't know what yet. "Do you ever get scared of the future?" I asked. "All the time," he said, glancing at me with a small smile. "But I think being scared means you actually care about what happens next." I didn't say it then, but that answer stayed with me. After that, we started spending more time together. Group projects, study sessions, late-night messages that lasted longer than they should. I started to notice the smallest things about him. The way he always rolled up his sleeves when he was thinking. The way his handwriting leaned slightly to the right. The way he always looked at people when they spoke, like he really listened. I didn't realize how much space he was taking up inside me until one day, I caught myself looking for him without even noticing. I'd glance around during class, hoping to see his face. I'd hear a song and think of how he might react to it. It was terrifying and beautiful. My friends noticed too. They teased me endlessly, of course. I tried to laugh it off, saying it was nothing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't nothing. Then one day, as we were sitting under that same oak tree where we'd first met, he said something that made my heart stop for a second. "You know," he said softly, "you're my favorite person to talk to." It wasn't a confession, but to me it felt like one. I smiled, pretending it didn't mean much. But that night, I replayed those words again and again, until I fell asleep with a quiet smile on my face. Because maybe, just maybe, he was starting to feel it too. It happened on a quiet evening after school. The sky was turning gray and the rain had just stopped, leaving that soft smell of wet grass and dust in the air. We were sitting on the swings near the park, our usual spot whenever we didn't feel like going home yet. He wasn't saying much that day. I noticed it right away. Normally, he'd talk about random things, a funny teacher, a weird dream, or something silly he saw online. But this time he was quiet, lost in thought, pushing the swing slowly with his feet. I looked at him and said, "You're quiet today." He smiled a little. "Just thinking." "About what?" I asked. He hesitated for a moment, then said softly, "About how sometimes, when something feels really important, you don't know how to say it." I didn't know what he meant at first. So I waited, my heart already beating faster than it should. The air between us felt different, heavier, but not in a bad way. He finally turned to me and said, "I like you." Simple words, but they hit me like a wave. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at him. My hands went cold. My heart felt like it was both floating and sinking at the same time. He laughed nervously. "I didn't plan to say it like that," he said. "I just couldn't hold it in anymore." I wanted to speak, but my throat felt tight. So I smiled instead. A small, shy, uncontrollable smile. "I was wondering when you'd say it," I finally whispered. He froze, then smiled back. The kind of smile that reaches the eyes, the one that makes everything else disappear. And right there, under the fading sunlight, everything around us went quiet. It felt like the whole world had paused just for us. He reached out his hand, uncertain but hopeful. I didn't even hesitate. I took it. His hand was warm, steady, and somehow it felt like the most natural thing in the world. That was the first time we held hands. The first time the air between us felt like it belonged to something real. A few days later, it happened. Our first kiss. Behind the art room, where no one could see. It was awkward, sweet, and innocent. We both laughed after, faces red, hearts racing. But it was ours. After that, everything seemed brighter. Even ordinary days felt special. A walk home, a message goodnight, a glance across the classroom. All of it carried that quiet magic of knowing someone actually cared the same way you did. At that time, I really believed it would last forever. I didn't know yet how love, especially your first love, can be both the most beautiful and the most fragile thing in the world. It started with one sentence I never wanted to hear. "My dad got transferred again," he said quietly, eyes lowered. For a second, I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, trying to process what those words meant. We were sitting on the school steps after class, the sun almost gone, the air heavy with that strange silence that comes before goodbye. "When?" I finally asked. "In 2 weeks. 2 weeks. That was all we had left." I nodded, but inside everything felt like it was collapsing. He kept talking about how he didn't want to leave, how he'd tried to convince his dad to let him stay. But we both knew there was nothing either of us could do. His family had to move. That was just life. For the next few days, everything we did carried this bittersweet feeling, like we were living in slow motion, trying to hold on to every second. We still laughed, still teased each other, but sometimes I'd catch him staring at me quietly, and I knew we were both pretending to be stronger than we were. The night before he left, we met one last time under the old oak tree where it had all started. The wind was cold, and the sky was full of stars. "I don't want this to end," I said, my voice trembling. He reached out, holding my hand tightly. "It won't. We'll call, we'll text, we'll make it work." And for a while we did. We called every night, sometimes falling asleep on the phone. We sent long messages, pictures, random updates about our days. I held on to those little things like they were lifelines. But distance has a way of changing things. Not because you stop caring, but because life slowly gets in the way. Weeks turned into months. Calls became shorter. Texts came later. Sometimes I'd wait for his message the whole evening, and when it finally came, it felt different. Not as warm, not as full. One night I texted him, "Are we okay?" He replied, "Yeah, just busy lately." But deep down, I knew something was fading. The last message that broke me came on an ordinary day. He wrote, "I think we should stop trying so hard. I'll always care about you, but maybe it's time to let go." I stared at the screen for a long time, tears blurring the words. I didn't reply right away. I didn't even know what to say. That night, I cried quietly. Not the loud kind of crying, but the kind that empties you, because I realized something painful. Sometimes love isn't enough to keep two people together. And even though I knew it wasn't anyone's fault, it still hurt. Because for the first time, I learned what it truly felt like to lose someone who once felt like home. Years have passed since then. Life went on, as it always does. I finished school, moved to a new city, met new people, saw new places. My days got busier, my world got bigger. But sometimes, out of nowhere, a memory of him still finds its way back to me, soft and unexpected, like an old song playing from another room. It's strange how first love stays with you, not in the way that keeps you stuck, but in the way that reminds you what it felt like to really feel something for the first time. The excitement, the fear, the warmth, the heartbreak, all of it still lives somewhere deep inside me, even now. I don't miss him the same way anymore. It's not the kind of missing that aches or keeps you awake at night. It's quieter now, a kind of gentle gratitude, because no matter how it ended, he was part of a chapter that helped me grow. Sometimes, I still pass by places that remind me of us. A park bench, a song playing in a cafe, the smell of rain after a long day. And just like that, I remember the swings, the laughter, the nervous smiles, the way he used to look at me like I was the only person in the world. But I also remember the lesson it left behind. That love, especially the first one, isn't always meant to last forever. Sometimes it's just meant to teach you how to feel, how to open your heart, how to understand yourself in ways you never could before. He taught me what it means to care deeply. He taught me that sometimes people come into your life not to stay, but to show you what love can be. Pure, honest, and unforgettable. There was a time when I thought I'd never move on, that every story after him would feel empty. But life proved me wrong. You heal, you laugh again, you love again, differently, but still deeply. And even though I've met other people since then, part of me will always be thankful for that first love. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. He was my first everything. My first butterflies, my first late-night calls, my first heartbreak. And no matter how many years pass, that story will always be mine. Sometimes when it rains and the world goes quiet, I still find myself smiling. Because somewhere between the sound of falling rain and the memory of that oak tree, I can still hear his voice, laughing softly beside me. And maybe that's what first love really is. Not something you lose, but something that stays with you, quietly, forever.